era of multinational corporations. After conquering America in the decades prior, companies like IBM, Coca-Cola, and Ford began building operations that spread to every corner of the globe. But that presented a unique challenge. How do you keep track of money moving through dozens of countries at once, when every single one of those branches operates under a completely different tax code and a different set of accounting rules? Ideally, you'd have one trusted, independent outsider who could come in and check the books the same way everywhere, no matter which country you're operating in, which is what gave rise to these. Originally known as the Big Eight, they were firms which specialized in verifying companies' financial statements. They sat at the very heart of corporate America, helping run the biggest organizations in the Western world. By the late 1980s, the Big Eight together controlled about 98% of all public company audits. But gradually, as time went on, firms that couldn't keep pace with their bigger rivals got absorbed by them. So by the start of the 2000s, only 5 of the big original 8 were left. Now, in theory, it's not anything unusual for the worst performing firms to go extinct. After all, that happens all the time to smaller corporations in history. But problems start to emerge when new firms aren't able to come into the market at all. And in a sector like financial auditing, that's exceptionally difficult. Imagine you're running a multinational corporation that sells cars across Europe, and it comes to that time of the year again, and you need to do an annual audit. You're presented with 2 options: a new startup audit firm that nobody has ever heard of, or one of the same multinational auditing firms who's been checking your books for decades and probably does the same for all your competitors and most of the governments of Europe. On the balance of probability, you're probably going to go with the latter. After all, this isn't really the kind of thing that you want to take a risk on. The point is, it's a world built on reputation, and that's exceptionally difficult to build from scratch. So over the last couple of decades, we've seen this same effect of consolidation play out across all sorts of industries in corporate America. 3 credit rating agencies, S&P, Moody's, and Fitch, collectively control about 96% of the global ratings market, a dominance they've held for over a century. And it's the same for strategy consulting. McKinsey, BCG, and Bain dominate not because nobody else can do the analysis, but because "we hired McKinsey" is a much easier sentence to say in a board meeting than "we hired a firm that nobody has ever heard of." Law, finance, asset management, private equity, all of these industries are increasingly dominated by a smaller and smaller number of firms. And in practice, that means these companies can get away with offering worse and worse services because they know that their buyers don't really have any sort of alternative. Now, big corporations across all sorts of industries have been getting away with charging huge prices for subpar services simply because they control enough of the market. And the same thing has been happening to your SIM card, especially when you go abroad, which is where the sponsor of today's video, Saily, comes in. Saily is an eSIM app that works in over 200 destinations. It gives you instant mobile access the moment you land, no physical SIM card needed, no airport vendors, and my personal favourite, no fumbling around with kiosks. Pick your plan before you travel, and the second you touch down, it activates and connects automatically. You get affordable data plans in multiple destinations without the expensive roaming fees carriers love to sting you with. Every plan you buy also earns you credit towards your next one. And don't be that person hunting for airport Wi-Fi while you figure out the bus. Turn on Saily's security features to keep your location private. Download now and use code INVISIBLEGAME to get a 15% discount on Saily data plans. Download the Saily app or go to saily.com/invisiblegame. Now let's get back to the video. As the quality of the services which a lot of the country relies on continues to decline, something is eventually going to go badly wrong. And in 2001, that's exactly what happened. By the late 1990s, Enron was one of the most admired companies in America, an energy trading giant worth tens of billions of dollars on paper. And its auditor was Arthur Andersen, one of the Big Five. And the relationship between these two companies was extremely lucrative. In the year 2000 alone, Andersen earned $25 million in audit fees and an additional $27 million in consulting fees, both from Enron. However, behind the scenes, Enron was quietly hiding roughly $20 billion in debt off its balance sheet, using a web of shell companies built specifically to make Enron look far more profitable than it really was. Of course, spotting that kind of manipulation was exactly what Arthur Andersen was getting paid for. They just completely failed. And when that came out, it cost the company so much that just 9 months down the line, they completely collapsed. The trouble is, rather than learning the lesson from this, that corporate America had become uncompetitive and needed to be broken up, the opposite ended up happening. Today, those 4 remaining audit companies audit every major organization in the Western world. Of the 500 biggest corporations in America, 498 are audited by these companies. And when a firm picked which company they're going to go with, it takes them an average of 23 years to change once. This is BCE Inc., Canada's largest telecommunications company, and it's been audited by Deloitte for 144 years. Now, that might sound like a recipe for subpar service, and in many ways it is, but as long as these firms could maintain the illusion of prestige, it just about works. The problem is, after decades of charging millions for audits that aren't even accurate, people do eventually start to notice. In 2022, regulators found that 43% of EY's audits had what they called a deficiency, essentially meaning that the auditor didn't even gather enough evidence to actually support the opinion it was signing off on. The following year, they were forced to walk away from 84 audit clients, giving up $215 million in fees. And it's not just them either. Regulators found that the average deficiency rate across all Big Four firms more than doubled in just 2 years, from 12% in 2020 to 26% by 2022. Given that, it's hardly surprising that firms are increasingly choosing to bring in what they call in-house, or moving these services out to smaller firms. And this isn't just an audit story, it's the same pattern playing out right across the corporate world. These giant firms spent decades building themselves into effective monopolies on the back of the idea that what they did was so prestigious that nobody would ever seriously challenge them. However, the problem is, once they became safe, the quality began to quietly slip, year after year, until eventually the firms that were supposed to be the kind of gold standard in the industry are now the ones that are rubbish and don't even do the job they're paid for. Now, it's important to remember that a big part of why these firms were able to dominate for so long wasn't just their reputation, but the scale of cheap, high-quality labour that they could attract. For decades, the best graduates from the best universities funneled straight into some version of accounting, law, or finance, almost by default. At Harvard, roughly 57% of the class of 2022 went straight into finance, consulting, or technology, and that made it insanely hard for smaller firms to compete with them, as their name brands just didn't have the same CV attraction for fresh grads. But ever since the introduction of AI, that advantage has been massively eroded. The very same tasks which gave these massive firms a competitive edge are exactly the kind of work that AI massively speeds up. Data extraction, pattern matching, document review. The actual grunt work that used to require armies of junior staff can now be done faster and cheaper by software, supervised by a smaller and smaller team. And perhaps most critically, none of this groundbreaking technology is exclusive to the old corporate giants, which massively reduces the barrier to entry to compete in the market. Okay, so the sudden introduction of AI, along with the fact that the services the Big Four were providing just weren't that good, has meant that the companies have been bleeding clients for years now. But there's actually an even bigger threat to these companies, which might bring them down